The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to RAPA's Service-Oriented IT e-learning session for the week of July the 7th. Today we'll be focusing on the IT component hierarchy, which we've had several sessions on already, but today specifically we'll be looking at service level and operational level agreements. As is the norm for our sessions, our format is a panelist discussion on key considerations related to SLAs and OLAs, and I won't read the description. But moving forward, let's just spend a little bit of time introducing our panelists. Pierre, you first, please.
Sure thing. Just for everyone's knowledge, I'm on the road today, and so I might be cutting in and out, but hopefully things will proceed without a problem. Yes, Pierre Paquette, Chief Technology Officer here at RAPA. My background is software development, and over the last 25 years, developing solutions for IT departments. More specifically, in the last 10 to 15, been working in the ITAM and ITSM space and developing solutions as well as helping clients get the most out of their technology within while managing their IT environment.
My name is Susan Odell. I'm COO at RAPA, and my focus is on the business side of our consulting practice as well as internal operations. So my background is really in focusing on operational improvements, strategic planning and measurable impacts of new initiatives and new ways of doing things. My background from a technology point of view spans service management, asset management systems, document and learning management systems. And really I'm the bridge between Pierre and Richard, who will introduce himself next.
My name is Richard Larocque. I'm the IT Management Knowledge Director at RAPA. My areas of expertise are really around process and service-oriented IT, so trying to help organizations define the processes they need and also define the way they work to be more service-oriented. So again, a lot of synergy between Pierre's view from a technology perspective or more a technology perspective and Sue's business background. Together we can really focus on the entire gamut of the IT business.
Yeah, I do think it's important to note that our expertise really is in the enterprise space. So the complexities of larger organizations, which is different depending on the country that you're talking about, but where you have multiple business units, maybe independently managing things differently, complete subdivisions that have to purchase together and work together, and acquisitions, and all of the complexities of large enterprises really our depth of knowledge. So just wanted to point that out as well. So just before we get into this session, definitely would encourage you to visit our website, rapaconsulting/resources/videos. The first 8 sessions and all 11 in total will be posted and have been posted already. So you can see from the beginning of defining what the business value of service-oriented IT is from session number 1 right down through great details of things that you need to understand when you're trying to transition to a service-oriented organization. So I encourage you to go there. For today, our focus is on service level agreements and OLAs, and this is a great graphic. Did you just want to talk about that a little bit, Richard? Simply states what the differences are.
Yeah, well, basically, it focuses on the center of the graphic is really almost a CMDB type view of the IT the IT service, and it's really to show the SLA. When we're talking SLAs, we really are talking about the top portion, service to our clients or customers, whereas when we're talking OLAs and UCs, it's anything below that line where we're getting into technologies. And I think this is important because people tend to mix these things up, and terms SLAs and OLAs and even underpinning contracts are used all over the organization, and sometimes it causes confusion.
Great. Okay, so we'll move on to the slide. Oh, go ahead, Pierre.
No, I was just going to add, I really like this topic because it does start to, it does make the more technical people start to think of what they're offering and what they've got. So, we're talking about those contracts and the OLAs. It's more from the technical point of view of understanding what you've got, how you're delivering it, and it's not just about technology. Unfortunately, a lot of times this area is taken on maybe a little lightly on the technical side. Anyway, yeah, let's continue.
Agreed. Okay, so before we get into some of the more management aspects of OLAs and SLAs, Richard, if you could take us through the definitions.
Okay, so basically these are, fairly generic definitions, mostly based on what you can find in the ITIL literature. But, so an SLA is about documenting services, service levels, service targets between, IT. I said IMS there, and it's actually from a client. It should just say IT, and a specific client. So it defines, an instance of a service where, an IT organization may have a set of service offerings, but now an SLA is getting specific of what you're offering to a specific client. It's saying, for this client, I'm going to do, a service desk with, 4 hours response time for incidents, which may be different for other clients. So it describes the service, the quality of it, so the service levels, the roles and responsibilities of both sides, both the client and the and IT, and then how things will be managed if there are issues and so on and so forth. It must be signed. It's important to do that. I mean, just putting an SLA in place and saying we have an SLA doesn't mean that it's worth anything unless it's actually signed. There's an approval process for it, and then there's a review and a renewal process. An SLA shouldn't last forever. It should be reviewed annually and looked at and gone through and adjusted. On the OLA and underpinning contract side, and I bunched those two things together purposely because they are very similar in a lot of ways. There are documents. They document the arrangement between different service providers, either internal or external, to support the service that we deliver. So the whole intent of doing OLAs and UCs is making sure that what we do internally within IT or with our suppliers align with what we're delivering to our clients. It's about alignment. But in the end, they kind of do the same thing as an SLA. It's about the quality, the service description, the quality of the service we can deliver, roles and responsibility. Again, they should be aligned with the SLA from a duration perspective so that we don't have an OLA that either ends or in the middle of an SLA or goes way beyond an SLA and becomes stale. So things to consider there.
Just a question before we move on. Let's talk a little bit about who typically owns or is accountable for ownership of SLAs and OLAs and UCs within an IT organization. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
Well, the accountability, I mean, it actually goes with the governance. There's a management process, of course, to manage, the SLAs, OLAs, and so on, which is very close to a contract management organization. In the case of, ITIL, it's usually called service level management that's responsible for that. But the accountability is actually, technically all the way up to the CIO or the director of IT. They're the ones signing this this contract with the client saying this is what we will deliver to you. So it should be part of the whole governance of the organization, and it shouldn't be something seen on the side.
Right. Okay. And then OLAs and UCs are more tactical in a way, right? Within the IT organization, those could be held or accountable within smaller groups, maybe even individuals, depending on what the UC or the OLA might be.
It definitely, and UCs could be kind of a wild card because you could have a UC, an underpinning contract that actually delivers the entirety of a service within an SLA. But that being said, you should still have an SLA in place between you and your client, and IT should be the one managing the underpinning contract, not the client.
Right.
So that's whereas OLAs are more exactly tactical between different units within IT.
So I guess part of the challenge there is that if the people writing the OLAs or the people writing the SLAs, if they are too technically bound, a lot of the technical aspects will show up in the SLA, and I don't think that's right. I think in the next slide we'll be talking more about the point of view of the SLA and the OLA, but definitely hear left side, right side is, left side SLAs talking business and business language, and OLAs and UCs are talking the technical language because they are tied to that technical side of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good discussion. So moving on to the next slide. To your point, Pierre, the IT perspective.
Yeah, okay, I thought Pierre would jump in here. So, again, I think if you could do the whole build,
Sure.
I think it'd probably be easier to talk to. So, really the IT perspective, definitely focusing on, the internal workings of the IT organization, the services, the capabilities, the technologies that we have that need to come together to actually deliver the service. Whereas, the client perspective being what the client sees. I mean, and they shouldn't be seeing that, they need the network throughput of this level to be able to use this application. That should all be transparent to them. They should just have service levels. And I think there's an arrow. Yeah, there you go. So, the OLAs and UCs that, govern the internal workings end up, supporting the SLAs that actually, align with the service catalog and the services we deliver.
So there's something
on the IT perspective.
I was just going to make one small point, Pierre, before
Yeah.
There's something that Richard says all the time that is very relevant here, which is about insulating customers, clients, from the complexities of IT, and that's entirely relevant here as well. When you look at the top image and the bottom image and the two perspectives, you should be approaching your SLA and OLA and UC approach based on that again. What is relevant to a client and what will just confuse them and that they don't need to see because it's not relevant to how they interact with the tools that they need to do their job.
Right, and the IT perspective, where we're talking about the OLAs and the UCs, I mean, it is complex. We're not just talking about one OLA or one underlying contract. There could be multiple UCs and multiple OLAs that affect one service. And in fact, OLAs and UCs may affect one or more services as well. And it's setting up the services to better understand or to understand what you are capable of delivering or what you're capable in terms of risk, right, in terms of offering a service at a specific level. And yeah, anyway, yeah.
Okay.
No, and Pierre, just to your point, and I think we'll touch upon it a bit later too, but one of the things we need to be cognizant of is this can get really complicated if we try to make, UCs and, well, UCs we have to because it's with an external organization, but if we try to make OLAs for everything, and then we have OLAs that cross SLAs, and I mean, it just becomes a management nightmare. So you have to be careful of what you do there. But we'll touch upon that a bit later.
So just before we move on, Richard, can we talk about that a little bit? Some of our customers that we work with, and just from our years in the business, we know that maturity in SLA and OLA and UC implementation, or operationalizing this type of management of agreements, maturity is not pervasive.
No.
Right. So if we're just, a scenario where we've got someone who is really struggling to just get to first base, and they just, what should we be thinking of in terms of an approach?
Yeah, well, I mean, right off the bat, UCs are, again, a wild card because you may have, contracts with, external suppliers for any type of service, whether, desktop management or things like that, that you do even, sometimes even before having started to think about services. But, so UCs is something that you need to deal with a bit on the side. It has to align with everything, but sometimes you're locked into something before you even define services. But if you were to start, day one and you need to start doing this, obviously the first step is to, put down on paper what are your services, and then even if you don't necessarily go SLA initially, is having discussions with your clients as, what are the expectations from a service level perspective? At least getting that understanding to start without first, I wouldn't show up to a client with, we need to sign an SLA this week as the first step, because it just becomes, a bone of contention between everyone. But, start by defining the services, defining the levels that client want, trying to understand if your IT organization can deliver those services at those levels, and then work from there.
Right.
Yeah, I guess talking about maturity and talking about SLAs and OLAs is a mature capability, and you're right. I mean, IT departments will start off offering services at without considering the actual overall service and the service levels they are thinking of providing. So in a lot of cases, becoming more mature, the challenge is aligning what you currently have to the services and the service levels you want to deliver to. In a lot of cases, the service levels is best effort, and they start from there in terms of low maturity, and as they become more mature, then it moves away from best effort to what exactly they can deliver.
Exactly.
Right.
Good point.
And we can never forget that there are people behind these things. So when you're planning out your path of what type of an SLA commitment you're going to make to your clients and what commitments you're going to make internally within IT, how does that map back to the resources that you have available to actually meet those expectations? So, never forget the human factor in all of this. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Richard.
Okay, so this, there's a little justification. Sorry, it just kind of threw me for a loop.
Oh, the R,
the R's and stuff. Sorry, I I kind of saw that and it jumped out at me. The idea here was just to show that, I mean, there is a structure. We've already alluded to it before, but there's kind of at the bottom, more within the IT world of OLAs, based on a technical service catalog. If you can define a good technical service catalog, it's a great place to start identifying what you do as IT, even before thinking about services. What are the technical things we do? We do network services. We have teleconference capabilities. We have servers and so on and so forth. And defining those in the technical service catalogs. These are then brought together through OLAs to support the definition of business services. UCs, they're kind of on the side because they can, be linked into SLAs or into the technical service catalog, or actually within the business service catalog directly, depending on the type of arrangement. Based on that service catalog is where you would negotiate, service level agreements with your clients and put things in place formally. And then on the side, there's this little, user request catalog. A lot of organizations start with user request catalog and say, hey, here, we have our business service catalog. But in reality, that, user request catalog is but a subset of the things that you negotiate with your clients. And you shouldn't really be putting a service catalog, a user catalog in front of users until you've agreed to what the service levels are and so forth in an SLA. So that's why it kind of, stems from the SLA as opposed to being like its own thing, completely separate. So go ahead, Pierre.
I was going to say, but we all know, in our experiences and the projects we've been involved with in the last few years, it always seems that the user request or the user catalog always seems to be the first thing that IT wants to put out there, and often that's the struggle we have, is for them to start thinking service delivery as opposed to technology delivery, and to get into that method of thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that we see very typically as well is that the things that end up in the user request catalog are not actually sub offerings of the business service catalog. They're technical service items. Right? They're very tactical things that are really key services that roll up to the user request catalog. So it's even more fundamental in its flaw than that, typically.
Yeah, and then they do have OLAs on those technical services. They kind of rebrand OLAs to SLAs, and call those SLAs, which again is something we've seen. Yeah.
And also, I mean, what tends to make it into the user request catalog is something at a very detailed level. I mean, you could have like password reset in there. Well, it's really an easy way to manage, service request management, which we talked about previously. It's an entry point where, users can request things. But in the end, that is not the service level, that's not the business service catalog, and it's certainly not representative of what you would have in the SLA. So just to go a bit on the sidebar there that we have, you know, some of the key things to think about from an SLA perspective. Obviously, ideally, you would want SLAs to be in place for all services to all clients, you know, but you have to obtain the agreement of the service levels you're doing. In some cases, some organizations have, you know, SLAs that blanket across all their clients, and it's all the same. If clients agree to that, great. One example of that is you know, desktop services type service, where, you know, all the organization basically gets the same service, you know, regardless of whether you're HR or finance or whatever. So you could have a blanket SLA for that as long as everyone agrees to it. Another point to think in, and we've talked about it earlier, is, you know, you need to control the number of OLAs or it will become unmanageable. You don't need to have an OLA for everything that everyone does. I mean, OLAs should really be established in cases where they are essential to supporting a you know, a specific service to the client. It's, you know, sometimes hard to determine where it's essential or not, but, you know, when in doubt, question yourself as to, you know, do I really need this to operate as IT? Because once you put that OLA in place, you have to manage it, you have to monitor it, you have to make sure that people, you know, abide to it, and it's a lot more difficult. And then the last point is just something to keep in mind, is that underpinning contracts may predate, you know, SLAs and OLAs, and, you know, we may have to work with them as they are, even if they don't really work well with what we want to try to do. So, key points there.
So
Yeah, I guess.
Go ahead, Pierre.
I was going to say, once again, you know, the keep it simple principle applies. SLAs, blanket SLAs, start with those. Minimize OLAs to the OLAs that are the more impacting and the more impacting on the services you deliver, not necessarily the technology underneath. Yeah, so keep it simple.
Yeah, and that's my point. Is actually very, very relevant to that. You know, we talked a lot about, and this image shows where you should be plotting your path towards. Anything in IT service management can be pretty overwhelming if your current state is fairly chaotic. And so it's important to say, this is my end goal, but what is it that I can do, for example, in this budget year, in this budget cycle, to move one step or three steps closer towards this best practice structure. So, you know, these are not initiatives that happen overnight, but it is important to say, this is where I want to be, and this is going to, maybe it'll take me 3 years, maybe it will take me 5 years, but today, based on my resources, based on my budget, I know that I can at least clean this aspect of it up and then make your plan towards that. So just wanted to give that message out there, that we know that the majority of clients are marching towards this. This is not the norm, but it is an important goal to set your eyes on.
Yeah, I guess another topic of discussion that we're not going to touch on very much here, and it does tie to, you know, a progressive approach to doing things better, is as you are, you know, putting in place, you know, OLAs and SLAs, you always have to keep track of how to measure them as well. So I know metrics is a big topic, and we have decided not to dive into it too deeply in this series here, but definitely something we may talk about more in the future.
Right. Okay. So, Richard, if you could take us through our takeaways.
Okay, so pretty simple, and I think are things we've talked about already, but OLAs and UCs, you know, should support the SLAs. That should be the structure. It shouldn't be the other way around. You shouldn't have to build SLAs to, you know, to align with OLAs you've put in place, especially considering OLAs are within your organization, the IT organization. UCs are a bit different in the sense that, you know, you may have to deal with a UC that's already in place, but, you know, there should certainly be a little sticky note on that UC to say, you know, when we renegotiate, we need to align with the SLAs we want to do. SLAs and OLAs are about understanding service quality, and that's important. I mean, it's not about putting in penalties and finger pointing and blame within an organization, because that will not work. So having an OLA in place is not a reason to be able to say, yeah, it's their fault, it's not mine. So, it's really about understanding how we deliver quality service to our clients. Again, controlling the number of OLAs, I think, is essential. You have to make sure that you put OLAs in place where they are absolutely necessary. And then, all of this is great, but you need to have the right business function, governance, process, people, and tools to be able to establish this, to manage the agreements, to monitor them, and then control them. If you don't have that in place, the SLA is just something that you put on the shelf and you look at once in a while. So it's very important to have the whole business structure around it to really actually do something with it.
Terrific.
Yeah, and with that as well, we're talking people, process, tools, and technology. Yeah, IT typically, are tool-oriented and not necessarily business or as business-oriented as they should. And this is an area where they need to be in terms of managing those contracts and better understanding business implications as opposed to technology.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a great discussion. As always, we have almost too much to say, and we end up trying to, get it all in there in 30 minutes. But if anyone would like a copy of this presentation, please send us a note at info@rapaconsulting.com. We'd be happy to send you a copy of the PPT directly. Next session will be on July 28th. We'll be focusing on change and release management. And again, its important role in service-oriented IT. We are coming to the end of our series soon. I think we've got 2 or 3 sessions left, and then we'll be looking at our calendar of events for the fall. So if you are interested in any particular topic in the sphere of IT management, IT business management, IT service management, right down to understanding data within the different aspects of IT, we'd love to hear your thoughts on things you'd like us to talk about. And then in the meantime, we do have a way of getting a better view of the big picture of IT. Would encourage you to visit rapaconsulting.com/RAPA Insight and take a look at a 3-minute video that you may find quite interesting. So on that note, that's the end of our session today. Pierre, Richard, any final words?
No, I think we've I think this was a good one, very interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, and like you said, there's always lots to talk about. OLAs, SLAs, contracts, and didn't even scratch the surface in terms of how to keep track of this information. That could be a whole other webinar as well. So yes, lots to talk about.
Absolutely. Okay, well, have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you on July 28th. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.